What's up, movie freaks? So, October is just around the corner, and I was starting to pick out some movies for my 31 Days of Horror, which I do every year. And I thought maybe I'd, well, first off, challenge you guys to do it with me. It's just you watch a horror movie every single day in October. So follow me on Instagram. I'll link it down below. That we can see what I'm watching, and then post what you're watching so I can see what you're watching, and do this with me. And then also I figured I'd give some horror suggestions, some recommendations for people either just starting out in horror, or maybe a little lesser known things if you're already into horror but looking to expand more. But okay, so to start out, this one's a little somewhat mainstream, pretty easily accessible, but It Follows. It I think came out in like 2014, maybe 2014, and I really don't like a whole lot of modern horror. I mostly like the older stuff from the 80s and the 70s. But a lot of modern stuff just doesn't do it for me. But this one felt really fresh and just really well done. There's great cinematography, and I just think all around it is just really fresh and well done. So if you haven't seen this one, definitely check it out. And I know I just said I don't like a whole lot of modern ones, but I've got a couple more modern ones to start out with the recommendations. The next one is The Witch. I love this movie. This is just a masterpiece to me. This one's from 2015. It's just so realistically done and based in realism. They use old English in Old English in America style of dialogue to be true to the times, and it's not exactly for everyone. I know some people find it really boring. It's not your traditional jump scare type of horror movie, but for me this is a real horror movie, and it's just so masterfully crafted. So if you like really good films and maybe a little bit slower pace, maybe a little bit of a break from traditional horror, give this one a watch. And next we have the Babadook. Now this is another one that's modern, but also not a whole lot of people liked this one, I felt like. But from the trailers, this was very much marketed as like a creature feature, like a monster movie, and that's really not what this is. I think you'll enjoy the film a lot more if you go in knowing that this is a psychological horror film. It is not a monster horror film. But still, not for everybody, but I do think that this one is really well done and a step above most modern horror films. So give it a watch if you like. Up next, now if you're into horror, you've seen this already, but I just wanted to give some recommendations on some different levels. So if you are pretty new to horror, you've never seen any slasher movies, make this one your first slasher movie. This is Halloween from John Carpenter. This is just classic. It's 1979, and it is just so good. I watch it every Halloween, and that's kind of cliche, but it's just tradition at this point. So, and you don't mess with tradition. It's so good. I watch it every single year. So if you're new to horror, be sure you check this one out. Another one along the same lines from John Carpenter again, but if you're into horror, you've seen this. Another classic, The Thing. This one's a little more on the science fiction horror side, but in 1982 this one is. But it's also just classic. It's just a good time. A lot of practical creature effects and stuff, and so if you're interested in that sort of type of horror movie, like, check this one out for sure. And then a little bit more on the more violent and bloody side, Evil Dead 2. Now, why the second one and not the first one? I love the first one too, but this one is essentially just a remake of the first one by the same people with more money. So like, this was more what they wanted to make with the first one. So I would say check this one out. This is like the more perfect version, I feel. I feel like this is the best one of the Evil Dead series, which I do love all those movies, but I feel like this one is the best one. And like I said, this one's going to be more on the violent and bloody side, but it's also a bit on the comedy and fun side as well. So it's a fun time. And then up next we have another John Carpenter one. This one I feel is very underrated, and this is The Fog. And this one also is not very traditional horror. It's not like, it's kind of slow paced. It doesn't have a lot of big creature effects or big violent bloody moments, but this one is just very atmospheric, and it does really, really well at that. And I just think it's pretty underrated, and so I just wanted to give that one a shout out. Like, check this out if you haven't seen it, just because not too many people talk about this one when they talk about John Carpenter stuff. And up next, again, more on the gory side this time, but Return of the Living Dead. This movie is just a good time. And again, if you're really into horror, you've probably already seen this one. But this one is just ridiculous and just a lot of fun. It's like 1985, I think, 84. But yeah, just a lot of silly, crazy, over-the-top zombie fun. Check it out. And sticking with zombies, we have Zombie. The original title is Zombie 2, as it was supposed to be a unofficial sequel to Dawn of the Dead. They did that a lot in Italy back then, in the 70s and 80s, I guess. So this one is, a little bit more on the lower budget, not as well produced side. I would say if you're looking to get into Italian horror, this might be a good place to start. This is just a really solid Italian horror zombie film. It's a lot of crazy stuff. It's just a good time. This one's from 1979. It's from Lucio Fulci. So yeah, looking to get into old Italian horror? Check out Zombie, or Zombie 2. Up next, I'm recommending George A. Romero's Dead trilogy, starting with Night of the Living Dead, from like 68. Yeah, 68. Classic, just, kind of kicked off the modern zombie. So just a classic in its own right. And then, I don't have it on Blu-ray, but Dawn of the Dead be the next one. And then Day of the Dead, which is just, this is one of my absolute all-time favorite horror movies. There's just something about it, I don't know. This one is definitely very heavy on the gory side, as is the other two have it too, but this one I feel like is more so. So you don't want to check this out if you got a weak stomach, but one of my favorites. Definitely give this one a watch if you haven't already. And next, I would say if you're looking for horror movies that are maybe a little more tame and older, if you don't mind real old, like 30s old, I would check out the Universal Dracula and Frankenstein and Wolfman and all those. But the ones I'm going to mainly recommend are the Hammer Dracula and Frankenstein, Curse of Frankenstein and Horror of Dracula. These are probably my favorite Dracula and Frankensteins. Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee are just two of my favorite actors. They are really something special and just horror legends, and they're both in both of these, and these are just, even though they're from like the 50s, they're just a really fun time. I really enjoy these movies. I watch them every single year, so check them out. Up next, I feel like these were decently well known among the horror and like monster communities, but maybe if you're not deep into it, you haven't heard of them. But these are Norwegian films. First, Troll Hunter. This is like documentary, like found footage type, following a guy who hunts like trolls in the mountains of Norway. It's actually very interesting, and they do it in such a, it's done so well that it's actually, it sounds cheesy, but it's actually worth a watch. So check that one out. And the other one is Dead Snow. It's just a good time. Nazi zombies. I actually haven't watched this one in a couple of years, so looking forward to watching it again and see if I still feel the same. But I remember it being a good time, so maybe check out a couple Norwegian films as well. And then next, we're going to go to Peter Jackson. Peter Jackson's early films, you may have heard of Dead Alive, or Brain Dead, as it's also known as. I think Brain Dead is the original title of it. This is like one of the bloodiest movies of all time. I can't remember how many gallons of fake blood they used for this, but this is just a low budget, bloody good time. I think this is Peter Jackson's third film. It's just a good time, but again, it's really, really bloody, so if you can't do that stuff, then maybe skip on that one. But if you can, give it a watch, because it's just fun. And then also from Peter Jackson, now this one's kind of hard to find. This is the only like home release I've ever seen, and this is the DVD from Anchor Bay. And this was limited to 50,000 copies. I bought this years ago off of eBay. I'd never seen it in person, but this is Peter Jackson's first film that he made over like the course of, I think, like 4 years with just friends, until he was finally able to get like a little bit of a budget from some studio to like finish off the end of the movie. But this is just, it's bloody, it's crazy, like hilarious, and just over the top silliness. It's just a good time. It's just a low budget good time, and it's the director of Lord of the Rings' very first movie. And yeah, if you haven't seen it and you can get a hold of it or find it somewhere, give it a watch. Up next, Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon. I haven't watched this in several years now, so I'm not going to say that it's great, but I remember it being pretty good. I remember it being kind of like a, what's the word? Like a commentary, like it took a bunch of horror movie tropes and slasher tropes and was like trying to explain it in like a serious manner, but at the same time the film isn't taking itself like too seriously. I just remember it being kind of a fresh take and very interesting, and for that reason alone, just being fresh in the horror world, you know, it for me warrants a watch. So I'm gonna watch this one again this year, and maybe I'll do a quick thoughts on it after I watch it again to see if I still feel that it was good and worth it. But I remember it being interesting, so maybe check that one out. Up next is from South Korea. I love this film. I Saw the Devil. This movie is just so well made. Like it's very well produced. It looks beautiful. It's got great cinematography. Everything about it is just top notch, well done, and then it's just so brutal, and it's just brutal. It's great. If you haven't seen it, definitely check this one out. I think this is pretty watchable for anybody. Like, it's just a really, really good film. So check that one out. Up next is Let the Right One In. This is a Swedish movie, I believe. And it is a vampire film. But it's kind of an interesting take, I guess. It's not like other vampire films. It's not a traditional vampire narrative. It's kind of a fresh take, kind of different view of it, or different story that just involves vampire. I don't know. It felt like a fresh take, and so fresh takes are good. So I would recommend checking that one out if you want a fresh take on vampires. And then, keeping with the vampire bit, this one's from the 80s, but Near Dark. I feel like that this film is just very underrated, and I feel like not enough people know about it or talk about it. But this was one that was just, when I saw it, it was just like, it felt different and fresh than any other vampire stuff that I had seen. And so because of that, I just fell in love with it. So I've seen it 2 or 3 times now. I had to hunt down a decent DVD. I had to get that off of eBay too. This is another Anchor Bay one that was out of print, and I actually got one that's not all beat to crap, but actually in decent condition. But so yeah, if you want, this one's pretty watchable for anybody too. I think this one's not real like bad on gore or anything like that. So I would pretty much recommend this to anybody, especially because it just feels different from other vampire films. It's also got a pretty all-star cast. You know, you got Lance Henriksen, Bill Paxton. Like, it's directed by Catherine Bigelow. Just a solid film. So check that one out too. If you haven't seen any of those, check them out. In my opinion, they're all worth a watch. That's my opinion, but yeah. Hopefully this helps you find some horror movies for this October. Like I said, do the 31 Days of Horror with me. We'll keep an eye on what each other's watching on Instagram, and it'll be a good time. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Auf Wiedersehen.